Take care of us well. All right.
What's it called? What's that called? I read the report because
My pleasure.
So basically, number one. Number two,
I just want to be like,
it might have changed.
Nuclear options. Minority party minister. It's basically when you try to you attempt to pass it in a but it has the reasons called nuclear options. You just pass it on the law to stop the whole law.
I mean, I know we can go there. I can double check it. I know in the past, it was definitely but I think it's not worth it, so it very well might not be. We'll go back to that. Again, these are really challenges.
bring back.
And then you happen to know that currently has majority and then what about also there was last year when it's originally anyone, so I guess I'm gonna go that's a really good point. Anyone have any questions?
Lawyers are just like do the research aspect of Isn't it about just have a job as a court? Lawyers. There's no reading all this research.
Good evening. Good evening, take two. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Gemma Torsidia, and I'm one of the Constitution Day chairs for the Palm Beach County FAU. That's the Florida Association of Women Lawyers. I want to thank my co-chairs, Jessica Latour and Eddie Feistman. Yes, I'm terrible at pronouncing names, so this is like the worst job for me. Thank you all so much for being here. I know that you have a lot going on. We know that it's the evening and you are in college. This is sort of the witching hour, so we appreciate your time. We appreciate your attention. We'll try to make it as interesting as we can. I want to first thank all of our table leaders who you all have met throughout this evening. I want to thank Amy Borman, Rachel Bentley, Jamisha Rock, Leonard Fewer, Rita Clemens, and then I want to introduce our distinguished panelists. We are incredibly lucky this evening to have just a tremendous panel for you. Obviously, we all were in college at one point, and I have to say, if I had had this opportunity when I was your age, it would have probably changed the trajectory of my career much earlier. So we're just very lucky to have them here. I'll just briefly introduce them, and then we will start the presentation. I want to start in the middle with Justice Barbara Pariente. She is a retired Florida Supreme Court Justice. She recently retired from the Florida Supreme Court, and she is, we just are very lucky to have her here with us. She is an alumni of Boston University, and she went to law school at George Washington University. Yeah, that's good. That is the right instinct. Good work. Judge Sumani Bro, I want to thank you so much for being here. She is a sitting judge in the 15th Judicial Circuit here in Palm Beach County, and an alumni of North Southeastern University Law School, and an undergrad alumni of UM. So all the way. To the right, we have Jessica Callow. She is the current president of the Palm Beach County Bar Association and the assistant general counsel for Office Depot in the litigation department, focusing on commercial real estate and environmental litigation. She is an alumni for her undergrad of Truman State University in Missouri and a law school alumni of the University of Florida in Gainesville. And I'm sure he needs no introduction, but I will do it anyway. In the interest of equity, Dr. Mark Tunick here to my right has a lot of degrees. He did his undergrad at MIT, and then he has a master's in political science from the University of California, Berkeley, and a PhD in political science from the University of California, Berkeley. And as you know, he's a professor of political science here at the Wilkes Honors College here at FAU. So we are very grateful to have you here, sir. And thank you all so much for being here. Without you, we wouldn't be here. We appreciate your commitment and interest in our nation and in our Constitution, and we're just really grateful for your time and your attention. And with that, we will begin the presentation.
So does anyone know whether this is a special day, why we're having the presentation on this day? Yes.
Because it's Constitution Day.
Very good, all right. And actually, there is a mandate, I'm not sure it's followed, that universities, high schools should be putting on Constitution Day programs. And any idea of how old this document is? How many? 320, well, let's do math. Dr. Tunick, you can. Well, actually, it's 239 years. I was actually doing the math because when it was adopted was different than when it was written. So it's close enough. So that's why we're here. So let's talk about the Constitution.
So before we had the Constitution, there wasn't a United States with a president, a federal court system, or a Congress. There were states that were united by the Articles of Confederation. And each state could coin its own money, and each state could set up duties and tariffs. Imagine if one state said that, well, anyone who tries to import a product from another state, we're going to tax that. And how's the other state going to react? They're going to tax the first state. And so there were a lot of inconveniences. Imagine the inconvenience of having to change your money every time you cross the state line, for example. So the states realized that there were a lot of good reasons why we wanted to create a new federal government that didn't exist before. We wanted to create a presidency, a Congress, and a judicial system. But many of the states at the same time were very leery of creating a new federal government which could compete with them. And so at the Constitutional Convention, they created a limited government. They created a Congress and a presidency, but they said that Congress and president only has these enumerated powers. And the idea of the Constitution is it basically sets the rules for what the new government can do. The idea is that anything that Congress or the president does, it does because there's provision in the Constitution that the states agree to that authorize Congress and the president to enact those laws or orders. And that's the idea of the Constitution. And at the same time, not only did it create this new federal judiciary, executive branch and legislative branch, but it set limits to what this new government can do. Does anyone know what the main set of limits that was set up in the Constitution is called? Yeah.
The checks and balances.
Well, there's the checks and balances, but also there's a set of rights that no government can violate. The Bill of Rights. So that's the idea of the Constitution. And the idea is that anything that the president or Congress does, it does legitimately only if it was authorized by some provision in the Constitution. You think of the people who ratified the Constitution as the authors, who authorize Congress or the president to do what they do. And so I thought, and I'm going to give an example that I used in class last week. Many of us, I think, especially if we're not attorneys or haven't taken a course in constitutional law, just assume that, Congress can basically do whatever it wants. The big obstacle is it's hard for Congress to agree to do something, but if Congress agrees to enact some sort of law, then they can do it. But that's not necessarily true. They can only do what the Constitution says they can do. So recently, and this will cover the first 3 slides. Okay. Recently, President Trump announced that he wants to ban flavored e-cigarettes because he thinks, rightly so I think, that they're harmful, they're killing people. Can the president do that? Why not?
There's a system that you have to put forth, you have to go through the basic steps, and the president can't just put forth laws.
Okay, so there's nothing in the Constitution that gives the president the power to enact laws. So how could we enact a law banning flavored e-cigarettes?
We could turn to the proper jurisdiction channels. In this case, organizations like the FDA will be best suited for things like that.
Okay, so the Food and Drug Administration could that's how it would happen. The Food and Drug Administration would ban flavored cigarettes, but which branch of government is the Food and Drug Administration?
The legislative.
Is it?
No.
Yeah. Next to you. Okay, yeah, Aubrey.
The executive branch?
Okay, it's the executive branch. Does the executive branch have the power to ban cigarettes?
Yes, but it was given to them by Congress. The FDA's power was given to them by Congress.
Good, so that's right. So Congress authorizes the FDA to ban cigarettes or regulate cigarettes. What gives Congress the power to do that? Can Congress just ban anything it doesn't like?
They do have the power to regulate existing commerce, which would be affected by that law because they would, it would affect
Good. So, but the idea is that, I mean, most of us, I think, just assume, well, if Congress passes this law, of course they can, they're Congress. But no, the idea of a constitution is that Congress can only do what the people in the Constitutional Convention, or who ratified the Constitution, said that Congress can do. And so we have to look to Article 1 of the Constitution, where it says Congress has the power to, and lists 17 or 18 things. We have to find something there which would let Congress do this. Otherwise, Congress has usurped its authority and acts illegitimately. And that's the idea of the Constitution.
And what would, if they did that, how would the government or the people right itself?
Right, so what if Congress or the president enacts some sort of law or provision which they weren't authorized to enact, that nothing in the Constitution ever gave them that power? What will happen?
The Supreme Court could strike it down through judicial review.
Is that answer?
That's good. It would have to come all the way up there, but it's, the courts would then become involved.
Which gets to yeah.
I was just gonna say, the Supreme Court could also use its original jurisdiction if one state sued the other state, or if another branch of government sued another branch, because they follow laws unconstitutional.
Yeah, I'm not
So this next slide shows there's 3 branches of government: the legislative, executive, and judicial. And so we do have, like Aaron suggested, separation of powers, checks and balances. And the judicial branch can step in, because can we trust Congress to decide for itself whether what it does is constitutional or not? Okay, so many people think we can't because they wanted that law. They don't have an incentive to check for themselves. So that's one of the ways in which we have checks and balances. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so what would happen if all powers were in one branch of government instead of us separating them out into a legislative branch, an executive branch, and a judicial branch? I want to tell you, there was this book written by Sinclair Lewis back in 1935. It can't happen here. Have any of you heard of this or read this book? Okay. He imagined in this book that the President of the United States decides to take over and basically arrest members of Congress and put them in prison and get rid of the court system, take over his own standing army, and basically be the head of a corporate state. Now, do I have to ask, why would that be a bad thing? And how actually how can we be assured that that won't happen in our system? Why can't that happen really in our system? Or could it? What prevents that from happening?
Checks and balances, just the fact that we have 2 different branches.
Okay.
Everyone hear that?
We have 3 branches of government, so checks and balances prevents that. So do the judiciary, do they have the power to stop the president from building up his army? What power does the judiciary have?
To interpret the law.
Okay.
It doesn't have power.
It doesn't, the judiciary doesn't have any power.
Not to enforce anything, it just becomes
Okay. And what if it makes a decision? What if the judiciary told the president in this book, you can't arrest members of Congress, you can't abolish the court system, that's unconstitutional?
Well, the only thing that gives the court system legitimacy is if the person who has heard the decision believes in the Supreme Court. And so in this case, if the president was not believing in the Supreme Court and wanted to take over, he wouldn't consider that court's decision as legitimate. So he would just ignore it.
Didn't that actually happen when the Supreme Court nullified Andrew Jackson's Indian Removal Act, and his response was, you have decided it, but can you enforce it? Because that was the president's duty. So there have been cases where either the president has been given power by Congress to do wide things, like the Horse Powers Act, but is it bad that, because the Supreme Court can't enforce it, so can't the executive branch just ignore the decision, as Andrew Jackson boldly claimed?
So it's a sort of scary thought. The court system, the Supreme Court, they don't have control of military powers. They don't have control of the police force. They have some marshals, but they're not going to be a match for a standing army. So the court, why should anyone listen to the court? Because we regard the court as legitimate. And so it's very important, and we'll talk about this later on in the panel, that the people believe that the courts and the judges and justices are being fair and neutral and are separate from a political branch. They're sort of supposed to be the apolitical branch that we can trust and regard as deciding what's legitimate. So, okay. I think we can.
These are very, very thought-provoking. Thank you. And I was thinking of that for Andrew Jackson. I would not have had that same level of detail, but hey, you're in college and I'm retired, so. Just kind of happened. I know a president did that. Jacksonian democracy. So we talked about the fact that the Constitution, it sets up government and a limited form of government. And also that under the Bill of Rights, that it sets forth rights that the government cannot intrude upon. So my question for you is, this is a quote, citizens are guaranteed freedom of speech, of the press, of assembly, demonstration, and association. Who knows where that's from? Yes.
First Amendment?
From the First Amendment. Anybody else have any idea? Okay. Does everyone agree that it looks like it's the First Amendment? Although okay, let's see. Look where it's from. It's from the Constitution of North Korea. How about that? It actually has more detail than our Constitution as far as saying the right of demonstration. So let's see the next one. All right. Everyone shall have the right of privacy, of correspondence, telephone communications, mail, cables, and other communications, and everyone shall be guaranteed the freedom of ideas and press, and the freedom of the mass media shall be guaranteed. Now that sounds like a lot of rights. Where's that from? What's that? Anyone have an idea? Yes.
I'll say Canada.
You'll say Canada, because there's a democracy, and you'd say, well, that must be a more enlightened place, perhaps. Yes.
Well, I figure you guys are just gonna keep naming authoritarian governments that have rights. So Russia.
You got it. Okay. All right. I can't share. This is too smart a group. So the third one. Let's see here. Is there a third one? Okay. So here, this is my plea about that little exercise. So we look at these wonderful rights that are enumerated in the Bill of Rights, which actually came after the adoption of the Constitution, the first 10 amendments. But unless you've got a three branches of government, and particularly a judicial branch to enforce those rights, they're no better than the paper they're printed on. And that was why that little song at the beginning, was it no more than words, that it's very nice. Like again, we say talk is cheap. You can write it on paper, but how are you going to actually enforce those rights? So let's talk about the judicial branch.
So the judicial branch resolves disputes through the legal process. Unlike Russia and Romania, countries that allow for the courts to make anticipatory rulings, the United States can only decide cases and controversies. The judiciary can only decide an actively filed case, and the courts can only decide cases and controversies. Through the Marbury versus Madison decision, Justice Marshall identified what the role of the court was. The courts have the power to determine the constitutionality of the law, whether a law is constitutional or not. The courts are responsible to interpret the law based on a set of facts that are presented before it. As I said, they determine, in many countries, like I said, in Russia and in Romania, they don't decide case, they do anticipatory rulings. So the president or the ruler of Russia can go to the courts and ask for an anticipatory ruling. In the United States, that is not the case. The courts are responsible for determining the rule of law, which allows for the access for judicial review, determination of legal certainty, and they allow for proportionality. That's what judges are here to make sure the laws are proportional and that everybody gets equal access and the laws apply equally to each and every citizen. And also the role of the courts is to determine is to make sure that the system is transparent, which is where Professor Tunick comes in, that the people can actually trust the judiciary and trust that branch of government to do the right thing.